people's voice. Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the people's voice. I am Trey Evans, and I am the people's voice. Thanks for checking me out again this week. Checking us out again this week, I should say. I appreciate it. Today's topic is going to be a little bit more less investigative and research, and more of just a conversation from the heart about a topic, a part of conversations that have been going on in our country, here in the last few months, but definitely for decades, and if not for hundreds of years since the establishment of the United States. But today I wanted to talk about the treatment of African Americans in this country, particularly when it comes to law enforcement, right? Because we can go down the rabbit hole about so many different aspects of how African Americans are treated here in the United States, but I want to specifically focus on law enforcement and African Americans, and how law enforcement is utilized, and how law enforcement interacts with members of the African American community. So it's not going to be a whole bunch of stats and audio references. I'm just going to basically speak directly from what I have witnessed, what you have witnessed over the last couple of weeks, and put commentary to that, and let it lay where it needs to lay. So what made me come to this topic was last week was the 4th of July. And for those of you who listen around the world, I always like to make sure I acknowledge certain aspects and traditions. So in the United States, July 4th is celebrated, for those of you who don't know, to commemorate the United States gaining its independence from Britain, July 4th, 1776. And there are mass celebrations, and many people are highly honored by that day. So for me, I no longer participate in the day, a couple of years now, because obviously when you do this type of work that I do, you uncover a lot of information. And when you get new information, I always say it's okay for you to change situations, right? There's no reason for you to get new information and just to continue to say, well, I got new information, but I'm going to just continue to do what I've always done. I didn't necessarily get new information about the 4th of July, but as you mature and some information gets reiterated, you have to stop and say, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. Why, as an African American, would I be participating in the celebration of the 4th of July when I am a direct descendant of those who were enslaved during that period, right? So there was no independence for the African Americans in 1776. And if you do the history of, one of the um, strong agendas to why the Americans even began to want to push for independence. It also has a lot to do with slavery and fear mongering and philosophies that were being passed around that the British were going to basically free the slaves and add them to their army and things of that nature. So for me, I no longer celebrate the 4th of July. It's not a day that I celebrate, but I'm going in a whole nother direction that I didn't want to go in. The reason why I brought that up is because there is a speech by Frederick Douglass, and that speech is, "What to the American slave is your 4th of July?" And it is a widely distributed speech. It's a speech that he gave in, I believe, 1852 in Rochester, New York, July 5th. And he gave it, after the 4th of July, but he gave it's, some say it was on July 4th, others say it was on July 5th, but, it was still in that same realm that he gave this speech, what to the American slave is your 4th of July. So the reason why I'm going to come back around. I know I started off talking about law enforcement, and now I'm all down a whole nother rabbit hole. But the reason why I talked about that speech, and it's a great speech, and if you want to check it out, and maybe I'll play a little bit of a. Well, you know what? Let me do that. Let me play a little bit of a. I know I said I wasn't going to play audio. Let me play some audio from that speech. This would be, I'll play the version from Danny Glover, where he does a portion of that speech, and then I'll continue my point. So let me play that. This is Danny Glover performing, or I should say, well, I guess it is a performance of or reciting, I don't want to say performance, reciting Frederick Douglass's "What to the American Slave is Your 4th of July?" Here's a short clip of that.
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty in which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless, your denunciation of tyrants brass-fronted impudence, your shouts of liberty and quality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings.
And that's just a short clip of it. It's about an hour and change long speech. If you want to Google it, there are several versions done. I think the one that has been recently passed around the most has been the one by James Earl Jones, where he recites the speech. But it's a fantastic speech, and it hits so many of the key points that speak to not only the experience of the African American then, but it's still relatable to today, which brings me to the topic. And today's topic is about how law enforcement interacts with African Americans compared to, I'm just going to flat out say it, white Americans. And this came up for me because, like I said, in this speech, Douglass also refers to what he says, and I want to read this accurately. In this speech, what to the American slave is your 4th of July? Douglass says, and I quote, "There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia which, if committed by a black man, subject him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment," end quote. And when I read that line, it immediately made me think about the recent shootings of first of all, the recent mass shootings that we've had in this country, committed by white men. And then I'm reading the story about Jayland Walker. And for those of you who may not know, Jayland Walker was a young man who was gunned down in Akron, Ohio. He was only 25 years old. He was chased by police on foot. Well, first they chased him by a vehicle, then they chased him on foot. Basically, it was a traffic stop. They chased him. Officers, as always, believed that he had shot at them from his car, and they came back with the fear for their lives. And while he was running away, they shot at him. Now, up until this point, unfortunately, this story is common, right? Black man gets pulled over, attempts to run, decides that he, is in fear of his own life, takes off running, cops chase him. The cops shoot out of fear, right? And again, this part of the story is common. But then come to find out that not only was he shot at, but he was shot at 90 times, okay? One man running away from a group of police officers was shot at 90 times. Not only was he shot at 90 times, but 60 of the bullets actually hit him, okay? So, again, the story is all too common, but what makes it even more egregious is that it does not take 90 bullets to take someone down, one person running away. It doesn't take 90 shots. 60 hit him. So clearly, that is more than too many bullets that were unnecessarily let go to try to stop a fleeing suspect. And once I've heard that, I immediately started thinking about Amadou Diallo. And for those of you who don't know Amadou Diallo, this was a case back in, I believe, 1999 in New York City. Amadou Diallo was a student from, I think he was from Guinea. Yeah, he was from Guinea. And he was shot He was shot at 41 times by New York City police when I believe he was reaching for his wallet. And 19 of those shots hit him. I say all of this because, again, the speech, "What to the American slave is your 4th of July?" It just sat with me in terms of what Frederick Douglass said in that piece about the 72 crimes in the state of Virginia. That if a black man committed any of those crimes, his punishment is death. But if it's a white man that committed those crimes, his punishment is less likely to occur. And that speech was given in 1852. We are now in 2022. Okay? And, that's clearly well over, 170 years, something like that. And we are still dealing with this type of just insanity. And, at some point, you as an African American, and I'm speaking as an African American, I don't speak for all African Americans. I speak for me as an African American, and I'm sure there are African Americans that can relate. At some point, it's not you start to get, I hate to use the word, you get desensitized to it, to the point where you're like, well, what else can we do, right? Because then the flip side of it, right, is I then see, the 2 recent shootings that we've had in this country. And I don't even know if it's been 2. The 2 that I have, even taken the time to look at some additional information about. The first one was just recently. This was in Highland Park. This was the 4th of July shooting, which is ironic, where the white guy was on a roof and decided he was just going to shoot down into the crowd during the 4th of July parade in Highland Park, Chicago. His name was Robert E. Crimo. And I watched, the news reports. He shot down to kill. He shot with the intention to kill. He ended up killing, I think, 7 or 8 people. And then got in the car and drove across state lines over to Wisconsin, and apparently was going to kill some more people, but decided to surrender. Not one shot was let off. I watched the video. I watched him being kneeled down to the ground and handcuffed and taken away in a car. There was no highway speed chase. There was no foot pursuit. There wasn't, forget, 90 bullets. There wasn't 1 bullet sent his way when you knew that this gentleman, and I use the term loosely because it's a barbaric act, so I don't even want to refer to him as that, but you knew that he killed people. So why is it that there's such a distinction, a blatant distinction? I mean, even if you're looking at, what was the one with, in Buffalo, Peyton Graydon, is it, or Peyton Gendron, or Gendron, one of the 2, Peyton Gendron, I believe it is, or Peyton Gendron. Either way, same thing, killed a whole, went into the supermarket up in Buffalo, New York, literally scoped it out, went there to kill people. His intention was to kill people, and then calmly surrendered. Not a bullet, not a shot fired, no pursuit, no, we shot because we thought he might have had a gun or we wasn't sure, so we shot out of fear. And I guess that's where this eventually leads to, right? There is a ingrained fear amongst law officials, law enforcement officials, particularly, and you know what? It's not even color based because, you know, it's literally ingrained in law enforcement officials, law enforcement, police officers, that, you know, the black man, African Americans, and I shouldn't say black men because black women have been subject to a lot of this violence as well. As we know, with Sandra Bland, and so many names I can't even continue to go down the list of victims. But it's ingrained in law enforcement that black people are a danger because there is nothing that you can correlate to explain how in so many cases. And remember, keep this in mind, and I think this is something that a lot of times goes so not misunderstood, so many times is not talked about, or I guess needs to be remind everyone that African Americans in this country are the minority. We are not the majority. So the fact that this keeps happening to African Americans is a it is a tell. I'm looking for the phrase, but it is a clear indication that racism in America, not only is it alive and well, but it continues to fester generation after generation after generation. Because again, and I started this again because I was referring to a Frederick Douglass speech from 1852. Okay, and it is 2022. And what he said in 1852, and I'm specifically talking about the portion where he talks about 72 crimes in the state of Virginia. And I'm going to read it one more time because I think it's going to, you know, help bring this conversation to a conclusion. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia which, if committed by a black man, would subject him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. This, you hear this all the time, that this is by design. This is by design. And it has been in the design from the inception of this country, that African Americans are to be feared, controlled, and to be killed if fear of them not being controlled takes precedence in any situation. So, like I said, you know, when I started, this really, you know, for me is a personal podcast. It's not really, you know, one of my more researched in terms of stats and giving solutions or offering solutions and things of that nature. It just, some weeks the information is just like, come on, come on. You can't, if you have half an eye, you can have one eye, a half an ear. You clearly know that there is a agenda in place in the United States among law enforcement officials to continue to slaughter and kill African Americans in times of law enforcement policy, policing, and, we keep saying that, I'm not a we shall overcome type of guy. I'm see problem, fix problem. And even for me as a see problem, fix problem type of guy, I'm like, how do you fix the problem, right? It's not just about unifying. It's not just about, crying and putting on, black shirts and throwing fists up. Like, there has to be a fundamental change in thinking, in the philosophies, in the teachings, in the recruiting of individuals. I think law enforcement officials should be subjected to psychological evaluations annually in terms of where you at in terms of how do you view African Americans. I think it should be a question on there. And I think you will find, you would weed out a lot of bigotry and racist mindsets that continue to live and breathe within law enforcement in this country. So that's my time for today. I appreciate you guys checking me out, as always. If you want to comment, you can hit me on the social. You can hit me at I am Trey Evans on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. You can hit me at Trey Be Talking on Instagram as well. As always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the people's voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute. I am Trey Evans. The people's voice.